This is the subcommittee Ways and Means of the Greenfield City Council, coming to you from Zoom. Finally, thank you all. Please note that all items listed on this agenda may not be considered or discussed at this meeting and may be addressed at future meetings. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded by the Ways and Means Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20G. Quote, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of public body if, after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings. The chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. We'll do roll call at this point. Councillor DeSorger.
Here.
Councillor Healy.
Here.
Councillor Toronzo.
I'm here.
Okay. And Council Golub.
Here.
Welcome to Ways and Means.
Well. Thank you.
We have a full quorum tonight. And yes, Mike, thank you for saying that. We do welcome you, Catherine. Every one of us here can attest to the fact that this is not an easy job. But you won't find a better crew anywhere. They're really very excellent to work with. And we appreciate, I do anyway, and I'm sure the city does as well, appreciate everybody who serves on this committee. I want to say hello to Liz. I see you there. Hi, Liz. Thank you for being with us, still hanging in there with us. All right, so moving on, I need approval of the minutes, and this is April 7th, April 14th, April 11, April 19, April 21, April 25, April 27, May 4th, May 17th, and June 13th. Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, DeSorger.
Thank you. This is a great deal of minutes that to approve all at one time. It was heavy reading. This is basically, in summary, everything we did during our budget process. Everything we did with the mayor, with each department and everything else. Again, I'm very grateful for everyone who participated so well in this process. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes are approved. There is no public hearing tonight. We will go directly to our motions. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to draw down to that motion. There's a ton of backup paperwork that goes along with this.
Yes, there is.
All right. Okay, so we have a motion before us to appropriate the sum of $175,000. This would come from Fund 8400, General Stabilization, to fund an independent assessment and audit of the City of Greenfield's Police Department structures, policies, and practices. Areas to be covered but not limited are the following: organizational structure and governance, operating policies and procedures, department culture, hiring and promotional practices, professional standards and accountability, budgeting and planning. It's a 2/3 majority vote that is required, and the current balance in general stabilization is $2,153,843 and 45 cents. There is rationale for this motion listed below the motion itself, and there is attached to it some other audits that have been done in different cities. I want to open that up to discussion right now. And I also noticed that we have Councillor Bullock with us this evening. Councillor Bullock, may I ask, is this motion something that you were looking to speak on?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So let's, if it's okay with everybody in the group, let's have Councillor Bullock speak to us. I know she's been working very hard on putting some items in motion here, and I think it's integral part of what we're going to be discussing and voting tonight. So I will ask you, Councillor, if you would please start us off.
Thank you, Councillor Forgy. So I'm going to start by just saying I think we do need a police audit. I think we need some pieces of this to move forward. Many of you might have read, I sent a list of questions to the mayor asking for a little more description on the scope of what the audit would entail. Over the past month, since last month's meeting, I've met with about 50 citizens of Greenfield, really tried to get out of my bubble and talk to some new neighbors, folks that I hadn't spoken to through our budget negotiations. Ginny joined me for a meeting where I had about 10 people over in my yard to just sort of talk about what people would like to see for the future of public safety in Greenfield. And I did a deep dive into police audits, and I want to thank Ginny for sending me down that rabbit hole, because she sent us some information on Albany and Methuen's police audits, which both cost $76,000 and $87,000 respectively. I looked at Burlington, Vermont, which was audited by the company that the mayor shared. They spent $100,000 on their audit. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they spent only $30,000 on their audit. Oak Park, Illinois, $25,000. Calgary, Canada, which is an enormous city with much bigger policing and issues of violence and drugs, spent $200,000. Grove City, Ohio, spent about $20,000. So I want to start by saying I think we need an audit, and I think we need some independent review of policing in Greenfield. And I do think that this ask is on the high side. In the last month, what I've done is meet with people. I met with the mayor and the chief of staff. I've talked with a handful of counselors and many constituents and citizens of Greenfield, and I put together a proposal. I also talked with some folks from the city of Austin, Texas, and from the city of Oakland, California, which is, much bigger cities than we're in, but have dealt with some rather serious policing issues, racial animus issues as well within their departments, and are a couple years out from sort of where we are tackling these issues right now. So I did put together a proposal. I shared some of it at committee chairs, so this might be a review for some of you, but what I'm proposing is that we amend the budget that is proposed right now for the police audit, and that we split it so that we offer about $75,000 for a police office audit and $75,000 for a city community task force. And that task force would meet regularly over the period of the audit to support these outside auditors in coming in and making sure that these are appropriate suggestions, that there's appropriate community involvement through this process, and understanding of the unique needs of Greenfield. And then in the long term, this task force would be a mechanism for there to be more robust community engagement for defining really a vision of public safety in Greenfield that's focused more on prevention in subsequent budget cycles. So some of the things that we talked about when we were budgeting around how some of our preventative areas, our preventative coalitions, they only receive very small amounts of the budget. This task force would be tasked with implementing some more long-range projects that would happen. And so I have a more full proposal. I do think it was emailed out to everyone after committee chairs. It's gone through a few more drafts since then as I've met with people and talked with people. So just in terms of mechanism for you all to know, it would be made up of about 20 people in order to staff appropriate working groups, and it would be appointed by nomination of the city council after someone demonstrates interest and commitment in the process. And there would be 3 appointments that could come from the mayor. But it should never, it really is a community-led task force, so it should never be made up of more public safety officials than community members. And so I'm going to resend this out to you, but I'm happy to answer any questions if Councillor Forgy is okay with that.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your presentation. I know that you had mentioned that it's at chairs, and I also know that was there anything that happened at A&O in regard to this plan?
No, we didn't discuss this at A&O yet.
Okay.
In the proposal, it does say that the task force would become a part of the charter language, acknowledging it as part of our governance, and that an ordinance to appropriately integrate it into our city charter. I was sort of I think it's important that we fund this piece of work. When I talked with Austin and with Oakland, who both had auditors and task forces side by side, one city funded it, one city didn't. The city that funded it, that task force is integrated into the city departments, and so there's been much more structural change and long-term implementation. That money was well spent. So this has stipends for community members so that we can actually get a broad range of representation here, not just folks who find a way to meet for many hours after work or on the weekends or things like that, but actually people that are really at the heart of the folks that are affected by policing and are affected by crime and public safety issues in our city.
Thank you. And that is very important to see it. For, as far as I'm concerned, having worked on the Charter Commission and committee and everything else, and having had that piece moved out to an ordinance designation, I think it would be very important for that to continue into charter language, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's very important. Okay, questions for our counselor, or if there are no questions for Councillor Bullock, do you have your own thoughts about the request for appropriation, which is really the target of what Ways and Means does? So that would be the first question, is discussion on the $175,000 request to fund the independent assessment and audit. The second piece is important in that there is planning that's going on right now to continue an effort to address citizens, a citizens initiative or a part of the charter that allows for a citizen board to get input into this issue. So I'll open it up. Anybody, I can't see everybody. I can see everybody except Mike. I can't see you. So if you...
Well, that's probably a good thing.
Oh, now I can see you. Okay. Now that you talk, I can see you. Okay. So does anybody want to start off the conversation? And we'll focus first on the 175. Mike?
Council.
Oh, and I'm going to call on Mike because he's up first, Ginny. Go ahead, Councilor Toronzo.
So I guess this is kind of a two-part, well, multi-part question. So per Councilor Bullock, you're saying that you want 75,000 to go towards this task force. What would that be paying for per se? And if I'm reading you right, like you're suggesting this be a recurring thing in our budget. So we'd be adding this in to year by year. We would have this task force funded. Is that the idea, that these are paid 20 members, you said, I think, like paid members is that what the 75,000 would be used for?
So the 75,000 would be used for stipends for certain members of the task force. So public officials, the task force includes or suggested to include things like a school committee member, a city councilor, two survivors or victims of crime. Those folks that are sort of lay people, not city officials, would receive stipends for being a part of this. In other places, what happens is the task force transforms into a departmental position within the city. So basically, this is creating a blueprint to put in place some new preventative and some new programs that would benefit the people of Greenfield. And then once that community input and education and planning is done, it becomes a departmental position. So the dream is that there would be a position within in Northampton. They just created one. It's called the Department of Community Care. In Amherst, they're also creating one. I think it's within the Department of Public Health, where they're doing, they offer, a peer response program, a harm reduction program, and a number of other services. So the 75,000 would go to those initial stipends. There might be some feasibility studies that need to be done to see what it would take to do some of these programs within Greenfield that wouldn't be a part of the specific audit that has its own scope of work.
Okay, so my follow-up to that would be, if it were to be a recurring thing, what budget would this be part of? And then I'm pretty sure, and I mean, someone can totally correct me if I'm wrong. I think two parts, like we can lower the appropriation. We can't determine what the money goes to. We're being asked for $175,000 for a range for this specific thing. And kind of the same thing we ran into with the police budget. We can say all day what we would like to have happen with the money, but we can't dictate anything. And so the second part of that, I guess, maybe the third part even, I think that also goes into any kind of budgeting. Like, I don't think we can just grab some money and say what we may or may not do with it. It has to have a reason for an appropriation. So if we're saying even if we wanted to just say, hey, we want to put $75,000 towards this task force, that's our recommendation, and then the mayor suggests it, and we vote on it, I'm pretty sure we still have to have like an idea of where that money's going, like pretty much laid out.
Yep.
And I might be wrong, but
So
If I may, please. Oh, is Liz?
yeah, I am.
Okay. What I was going to say is the question on the table right now is the $175,000. Is that the appropriate sum for the independent audit?
right.
Councillor Bullock is here to present another option, but she is basically not allowed to discuss or participate in the deliberations on this money item. And the point that was raised, Mike, with for us at this point, it's basically, yes, we're going to vote this, or no, we're going to reduce the sum.
Right.
But that is the issue right at the moment. And Liz, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to add, you and Mike are both correct that it would take a separate financial order to do the task
It
force.
would. It would.
And it would have to come from the mayor.
But
So,
it's also, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You're on track, and you know, it's a good thought, and I just think there's more, and Counselor Bullock has done a tremendous amount of work. I just think that we have to get further in the process to fund the appropriation for the task force. That's all.
Agreed. I
Yeah.
agree.
And just to clarify, I have met with the mayor. The mayor did affirm that she likes this idea. We did discuss where funding could potentially come from. I don't know where the council is going to stand on the $175 or $175,000 for an audit. But what I do know is that for me that seemed like a large number, and rather than have an audit move forward and at whatever, I knew that would need to be rewritten, and that will give us a month to figure out, does this get written into the charter? Do we get another fiscal order? Where does that come from? That sort of thing, and hopefully all factions can get some of what they want through this process.
Okay, I'm going to call on Counselor DeSorger.
Thank you. So I was going to say part of what Mike said, as I knew we really didn't get to determine or write the orders for that. So I'm just going to speak to the $175,000 figure. Right. And the idea of that audit, I guess, in general. So I also did the populations of the cities that we looked at with the amount of money that they allowed for their audit. The one that was the closest to the figure we had was the $200,000 figure in Calgary, Canada, and their population is 1.3 million. Methuen, 87,000, their population was 50,000. I actually spoke to the financial person in Albany, New York. Their population is $100,000, and their city budgeted $80,000. They allowed $80,000. And she said because part of it was during COVID, they saved some of the cost on transportation. Mary Ann listed some other ones, but I just want to say all of those cities had a population of like 50,000 or above, and Milwaukee's population was 577,000. And their audit was 30,000. So if we were going to spend something on an audit, I think that the figure that we have is not at all in line with, I think it's far too high, and everybody did just get their tax bills. My neighborhood is ready to explode. Everyone on my neighborhood, it went up probably $1,000. And although this is money that is in stabilization, it is money that people were taxed for. So I think that we need to spend that appropriately. And so I'm going to put out there that the number I would be thinking of, if I were thinking about it, would be markedly reduced. And I wanted to ask Councilor Forgy or anyone else if they know during the accreditation process of the police department, wasn't there some kind of an evaluation that was done? If anyone knows to speak to that.
The one that I know of, and this goes back, I would say probably 4 years, and I'm not speaking from a place of knowledge that is secure, but it was called an ISO audit. And I understood that the police department did very well on their ISO audit. I do not know what the parameters of that audit were and what exactly it did. But I do understand that there was something that was included in the ISO, which is I believe it is a standard that the departments are held to, and it really is a very, what do I want to say? It is something that a lot of few departments can actually reach. So we did very well in that audit, but that's going back, I'm thinking 4, possibly 5 years now, but that was the audit at the time that I was aware of. So I don't know if the mayor has looked at that particular piece or asked about it and how it plays into what the discussion is this evening. But that was a fact. That was a fact. Councilor DeSorger, are you all set?
I just have a follow-up with the audit. The one thing that we actually are looking at, the oversight piece of that was something that I had some concerns about. I don't know if anyone else had concerns about that, but you know, with the Buchanan case, both the mayor and the chief passed over 2 people who, you know, both of whom at some juncture have talked about, I'm watching my words here, being passed over for a discriminatory reason. So I don't know who, you know, the oversight of this would matter to me. Yes, do I think that we need something? I think that we do. I did like Councilor Bullock's proposal. I'm fine if we do some type of an audit, but the figure doesn't make economic sense to me. And I would need another financial order personally to endorse this that had something more of the oversight piece of this, because I'm just going to leave it right there.
Okay. Councilor Healy.
Yeah, thank you. I have to agree with Councilor DeSorder. I think, and Bullock, the number seems too high to me based on those statistics. And I'm not willing to kind of take it on somebody's word that they're going to support Councilor Bullock's proposal, because I think the way she lined up everything in the email was made logical sense. I think it's a great idea. Talking to constituents in my precinct, it's kind of what they had in mind. So I'd like to thank her for all that hard work, because I think it's a great plan. So, you know, I'm kind of holding back my vote on this to hope that we could get, like Councilor DeSorder said, 2 financial orders that go back and back that say, okay, we're going to give $75,000 to the audit and maybe $75,000 to Councilor Bullock's proposal, and get it all done in one meeting so we know both things are aligned and started at the same time.
Just from a procedural point of view, we do not have that authority to do that this evening. The only thing we have to decide is if the $175,000 is an appropriate figure, and make a recommendation on it. If we are not happy with that figure, we can decrease the figure. It could be amended. The motion can be amended to a different dollar amount, but there would have to be another financial order to come forward to put into place Councilor Bullock's piece. And that financial order can only be brought forth by the mayor. So for this evening, that's the task in front of us is the 175 audit at this point. That that's why when Councilor Bullock asked if she could speak this evening about her hard work and what's been going on, I said, yes, she could. It's appropriate. We can't break open meeting law with discussing and everything else, but it was appropriate that she let this committee know what she's come up with, and the fact that whatever, if we decide this evening, for instance, to make a recommendation to the council for a lesser amount of money, then we know that in general stabilization, there could be more money to implement. There would be more money to implement what Council Bullock is looking to do. So I'm going to try to encourage everybody. It's your vote. I will encourage everybody to vote on whether or not this is the right amount of money this evening, because that is what we have in front of us. But you can do whatever you want with your vote. I'm not saying that. Councilor Gola, we haven't heard from you, and I see your hand up. So would you like to jump into the arguments? And
I would, yes.
Okay.
So speaking on the 175, first I want to say I agree that we need an independent process to look at policing we really need that in this town, clearly. And so I'm grateful to the mayor that she's clearly wanting to invest significantly in this process. And I'm also grateful to Councilor Bullock for all the work that you've put into researching this. And excuse me, I've been sick. All the work you've put into researching this. And if we are to have a process, it needs to be a real process. The oversight needs to be trustworthy. And I think that that's one of that all sides can agree on, that trust is really meager or thin right now. And for public safety to really exist in this town, we need trust. And so I'm just looking over my notes for a moment. I think in order for a process to be trustworthy, people who have been most significantly impacted by policing in our town need to be part of the process. And in order to do that, folks who can't afford to show up for meetings need some type of funding to do that. I think that's really important. And ultimately, I would hope that this would be a process that doesn't just look at what the problems are, but is actually an investment in reimagining a public safety system, or whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like, but whatever that looks like, that it's a trustworthy process that really works to create something that supports the real needs of our community members ongoing. And so I would vote no to the current proposal. I would only vote yes on an audit if there's actually an oversight, an independent oversight process like the one that Councilor Bullock is proposing. And I think that's, and if we're willing to invest 175,000, let's invest it in an audit and in an oversight process, like Councilor Healy and Councilor Bullock have said so far. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. And so I will say that I am also in favor of reducing the $175,000 request for the audit. I think it is pricey. At this point, I understand that in today's environment, nobody's ever sure of what the price tag on anything is going to be at this point. But I do feel that the number is high. Councilor DeSorga made a good point that comes from stabilization. That was already part of taxpayer money. It was put aside for these types of things. But I think we should err on the side of being a bit more conservative in allocating funds for this particular audit. So having said that, is there a figure that this committee can be comfortable in recommending out This will be the two. This is the way I see it right now. And please correct me if I'm not understanding everything. We can recommend to kill it. Okay, just say a negative recommendation. There will be positives, negatives, those kinds of things. We can make a recommendation not to recommend this figure, or we can make a recommendation to reduce the amount and bring that forward. And this, by the way, is going forward for tomorrow night's meeting. So if anybody has any thoughts on what an appropriate amount of money would look like, the other thing we can do is that after discussion, we can always say we have no recommendation. Again, it's the committee's will. What is it that you would have known back out to council? What do you want the full council to know about this amount of money? So does anybody want to take a crack at reducing it, or do you just want to let it go out to full council and let council reduce it? What is your will?
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe I should know this, or maybe it's just the wording. So I'm noticing in the backup, I guess, for this order,
right,
that it's coming from the general stabilization, and it says it should be replenished when free cash is certified in fall. Any remaining funds are closed to general fund. So stabilization and general fund are two different things. Yeah,
that's correct.
What are the differences in the restrictions of use? Because I know that we talked about this with some of the other stuff before, that if we appropriate something at a super high amount and then it all of a sudden gets turned around into free cash, then all of a sudden there's a lot less limitations on it. And I know, Jenny, you had mentioned that before, the apprehensions to now all of a sudden it becomes not as controlled money. You know what I mean? Like the council has less control over certain things when it goes into different jars, if you will. So what is the difference between what would happen with it being in a stabilization fund versus the general fund?
I'm going to turn that over to Liz, if I may.
Yeah.
And then
so it's the funds are actually transferred out of stabilization into a new account number that we will set up for the audit. Similar to, let's say, a capital project where you approve so much from capital stabilization that goes to the project. I'm sure many of you will recall having repurposed funds that were left over. Everything needs to go to council vote. If it's closed to free cash, all free cash requires council vote. It's not like it does not involve council vote with any aspect of it. And it can't be used for other things. You know, it's being appropriated for the audit. If the audit comes in less, then either it could get repurposed with council vote, or it could get closed to the general fund because the project's complete and it costs less. And then that ends up in free cash, but that again, any free cash requires council vote to be utilized. So
I guess my question would be, why wouldn't it just stay in the stabilization fund? Why would it move if it's left over?
It's a transfer out. Okay. As with capital, you're transferring it it's an appropriation, it's for a specific purpose. So we set up an account number that'll say police audit.
Right. And
it'll have a budget of whatever you vote. The only other thing too, on the amount is just that it depends on the scope of what you want done. You know, how extensive of the scope do you want, you know? So I would think about that too.
Thank you. Councilor DeSorger.
I actually think that we should wait. I do not think that we should give a recommendation on this. I'm not hearing support in our group. I'm hearing everyone thinks that the figure is far too high. And I certainly hear what Director Gilman is saying, yes, it does depend on the scope of the audit, but a city with 1.2 million was the one that was closest to this. So it's nowhere within the ballpark of being close. And I have a problem with the writing of it, because to me, to vote for this, there's going to be more oversight in the financial order. I'm well aware that we do not write the financial orders. We have no say whatsoever in the financial order. However, we do have a say in whether or not we're going to vote for this. The other thing I want to point out, and Director Gilman said, you know, some things go back and we vote them this way, we vote them this way. If anything's in stabilization, it needs 9 votes to pass. There are some budgetary things that just take a majority. So I don't know, there are some budget items. There are some things that come before us that are a simple majority, and there are others that are a super majority.
But once it's voted out of stabilization, it will.
It's 9?
No.
Okay.
It's 9 to get it out.
It's 9 to get it out.
Yeah. But once it's out, you can repurpose it.
For a majority.
Yeah.
With a majority vote. So there is my point was, there actually is a difference. So we have more control of it. We have more control of the financial aspect of it with a stabilization choice, because you need 9 votes to pass. But right now, I think it needs more work. I'm not comfortable with the oversight piece of the first one. So, and I think that in a spirit of cooperation, we were talking about 2 things. This is a huge problem that is citywide, and it's actually bringing a lot of angst to our community. Very unfortunately, it's sad. It's, you know, I feel in a way, you know, I love living here, but right now it's sort of like Hatfields and McCoys. It's very sad. And so we need a healing power that comes back. And I think when this comes forward, this order, for whatever it is, it should be hand in hand with, even though we do not get to write financial orders, if there ever was a time when we were to be together on a financial order, or in the actual writing of it, or having input into it, this is the moment. Because like I said, it's like the Hatfield and McCoy time, and that's very sad. So as it's written right now, I'm a no. And I you know, we can I would vote. I'm not going to say table, because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's where I feel.
Thank you. Councilor Bullock, I saw your hand up, but I really cannot at this point allow participation because we are deliberating. So thank you. Any other folks?
Chris, if I could.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Toronzo.
I mean, I see that the way, I understand exactly what you're talking about, Jenny. And, you know, I would like there to be some sort of, unfortunately, not to say like guarantee, but a guarantee of that. Like I saw the questions that were addressed by the mayor in the email that Councilor Bullock had brought up. And I mean, they seem like plausible answers. It inferred that there was going to be, you know, some community input into it. It was going to be structured with different members of the community. That was the idea of it. And I don't want this to sound badly, but kind of like with what Jenny was saying, with the state of how things have been, even locally, with mistrust in general. I don't know if some part of a financial order could guarantee, you know, where it's saying the areas to be covered are this, and this, and will definitely include, you know, I don't know how much the financial order wants to get into the ins and outs of what they will actually entail that we'd be agreeing on. Because I think what we're talking about is we want some kind of like guaranteed oversight from the community, and that's not necessarily written in the financial, or this is just saying we're going to get an audit done, and we're hopeful that whoever gets the bid in the procurement process for the audit is going to adhere to that and include the community. But there's no guarantee of that. I mean, it's almost, I don't know, I kind of find it akin to the kind of the debacle with the Lund property. Like there's no guarantee of where that we're going to get what we're paying for necessarily, because we're not voting on the scope of, we're just voting on the money. Like we're not creating the scope. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a hard thing to, if we're not nitpicking the financial order to the point where we're writing the scope for it, it kind of seems we would have to be convinced that we are definitely going to get what we're asking to be paid for.
Go ahead, Liz. Go ahead.
You can make certain amendments into what you would like to see included in the scope. Like it was, the mayor put, I believe on it says, but not in, not excluding any further. But if there was something you particularly wanted, and I would still leave that language in, to not exclude anything, but you could add particular things. The only other thing that I want to mention is if you totally vote it down, you can't bring it back for 9 months. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if you table it, it's to a future date. Can the other piece be resolved by that date? That's just some other thoughts I had.
So following up on that, at this particular point, there is the time issue that is in place at this point. Definitely, the mayor did want to get an audit going, and as Liz has mentioned to us, if this gets voted down at council, an audit can no longer be brought forward again in this incarnation for 9 months period of time. I need everybody to think about the fact that an audit for the police department is probably, in my opinion, a very good idea. And the sooner it happens, the better, my opinion. Mary Ann's, Councilor Bullock's proposal, I think, is going to take some time to get it written out and get it squared away. And I do apologize. I'm sorry. I don't understand this whole thing here. And so the question now becomes for the committee to consider, do you want to hold up the whole independent audit for any period of time at this point, or do you want to vote down the audit so it can't come back for 9 months period of time? Those are two questions I think that we need to be mindful of. Also, I personally would not like to see a delay on this. I think the audit needs to go forward. I think if it goes forward at a reduced rate, that's a good thing. I think that there should be, it all depends on how quickly Councilor Bullock and others that are willing to join in and help can put together a proposal to bring out to the mayor, or to even bring out to, appointments and ordinances or a charter commission piece. How quickly can you get those pieces out? That's another thing to consider at this point. So that's Councilor Healy.
Yeah, so some great points raised since my last comment, right? So I do think it's important that the audit does occur. It's going to take some time. there are some statistics that we're going to gather from the audit that might be well worth spending some money up front to get now, so we have some data to review. And I think now that I really think about this, you know, if we do this audit and we get some definitive data back from the audit that says, okay, this is what we think you're doing wrong, this is what we can make better, at least that also gives Councilor Bullock's committee something to immediately start on when we do get that process through. So, and then we could bring the community into the audit and show them all these things and all these items that have been found in the audit, right? And kind of find common community solutions to those problems. So with that being said, I've kind of changed my heart on this a little bit, and I would suggest reducing it to 60 grand.
Okay.
That's it.
Is there more discussion? That is a recommendation, but not a motion. So if there's more discussion, Councilor Golub?
A couple of follow-up questions. So as I'm learning the process here. So
Sure.
It sounds like it's not possible, but I want to double check. Is it possible for us to amend the current proposal, adding Councilor Bullock's proposal that half of, that's not possible. I see you shaking your head, Liz. Okay.
All right.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a different, you can't amend the main concept, I guess. I personally think oversight, somehow you could work in, like, I'm just going to give an example. For the financial audit, the chair of the council and the chair of Ways and Means would often meet with the auditors, along with the mayor and myself. So but I'm not saying that's all, but would you consider minimally adding that, you know?
Okay. Thank you.
As a thought, because I understand that worry, because you want, even though it is to be independent, you really want it to be independent. I understand that.
Yeah, it needs to be.
Yeah.
So my second question is, I agree that something is a priority, but if we do anything, it has to be real. And I can say there's half of this community that will see this if it doesn't have a robust, specific, and I don't know if it's half, but there are a lot of people in this community without that oversight will just see it as, I'm looking for a better word, but
yeah, I understand.
But it will see it as whitewashing. That's the word that comes to my mind, that it won't be taken seriously. If we want something that's taken seriously, it needs a robust, specific oversight body. And I want to see something happen too. And I don't want to see this languish for 9 months. So my second question is there a way for us to say, is there a table? Is there a tabling? Is there something that's not a specific amount right now and not a no, but is a tabling or is sending to A&O, or how do we keep this alive, but have the oversight we need?
I think Councilor, yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, Councilor Jasorga.
We could move to table this for a month. The police department has existed without having an audit, with having the accreditation for so long. I don't like the expression that we're holding this up or that we're not allowing this to happen, but I'm not really happy with the verbiage. I think 60,000 is a very reasonable figure. So I like that, Councilor Healy. And I'm just trying to look, I'm looking at the agenda now, which is too small on my iPhone to be reading. I wish I had sent this to a larger something to see if there's other language, but I don't think 4 weeks is the end of the world either. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a little bit more oversight on our part with pairing the two things together. So, I believe in the wisdom in a group, but I you know, like I said, the police department existed for however long it did and continues to function with or without this happening. So 4 weeks delay. I mean, I'm just reading the room of the five of us. It doesn't seem like anyone was like over the moon enthusiastic about this. I have some problems with the language. I had huge problems with the figures, but I agree with Derek. I hope I can say Derek in the middle of the meeting. I agree with his number. And I'm not actually ready to even put the language in there because I'm trying to read this on a cracked iPhone. So, you know, I'm not ready to add the yes, it fell today. And I'm talking about gratefulness.org. That this cracked. I tripped on a little brain, you know, a root. And I thought, I'm so glad what broke was this and not my arm. So I thought, I practice being grateful all the time. And I just thought I'd share that little happy thought. And I kept looking at it and thinking, I'm so glad it's not my right forearm. So there you go. Anyways, I don't think that I'm not ready to do the language from the cracked iPhone. And I think it is very important. I heard that from Councilor Toronzo and everyone. And I thought, you know what? Everybody's going to go on and be doing their jobs regardless. And I'm not quite happy with it as is. So I'm for tabling it, but that's my thought.
Well, would you like to make a motion?
I would make a motion.
Oh,
I would make a motion.
Excuse me 1 second. 1 second.
If somebody else wanted to speak, by all means.
Yes. Councilor Toronto.
I was just going to throw out a reduced number as well. I find, I think I've said this throughout the whole budget process, and then with comparisons, no matter where they are, they're good to have. They're also contingent upon location as well. Like, I mean, I see that Calgary, obviously a huge city, another country, right? A very different economy, a very different model. Even going across the border, I mean, look at our minimum wage here versus New Hampshire's, right? You can't, and that's 10 miles from my house, and it's half our minimum wage. So sometimes looking at something as simple as a population to money isn't necessarily the only thing to look at. That being said, I do think that this was a little steep. I understand why, in a way, there was a large, broad range listed in here. The idea was it was going to be somewhere from 100 to 175. That's a pretty big jump. That's almost twofold. To kind of go with what we've been discussing tonight about the idea of encouraging the 75,000 to maybe, like, if we were going to say, all right, all we want to spend is like 150 on this thing, and, you know, really push like for a financial order for what Councilor Bullock was bringing up, something to that degree, leaving some money available for that. My thought was to, all right, take the 75,000 that we were talking about earlier and maybe add a little bit of buffer in there. And so I went on like 25%. So that brings it up to 93,750. So hopefully we can get an audit from 75 to 93,750, because I also don't think if we lowball, you kind of get what you pay for, right? I run into this with state contracts, and I hate having to take the low bidder sometimes, because I'm like, man, when someone comes in, you know, 30, 40,000 underneath what everybody else is there, I'm skeptical, but I have to take it because that's the requirement. And I know that in the procurement, we have to take the low bidder unless there's a real good reason that we could say no, that we're not taking that, you know. So I also don't want to get, if we're going to spend any money, I don't want to get a chintzy audit that we're not really getting what we pay for. Then we just blew, you know, whatever it is, 40, 50 grand. You know, I don't know. It's just, that's kind of how the way I work. I don't know, my budget in life too is like, I don't really want to buy really, really cheap stuff that I got to keep replacing when I could buy something a little bit more expensive that I'm not going to have to touch for 20 years. And I know that doesn't always work with all sorts of budgets, but I just, that was my, my thought on the reduced amount. But I also have, honestly, with the amount of that we've discussed tonight, just in the 5-person council, I think getting a 9 vote, a super majority in the full council is going to be pretty difficult without a whole lot of discussion, especially if we haven't got a kind of like a unanimous recommendation. Sometimes it's hard enough, even if we do have a unanimous recommendation, as we've seen. So, I mean, I wouldn't be adverse to necessarily tabling it. If we can't come to something tonight, there's also the option that we could just table it tomorrow at the full council if we don't feel comfortable. And we don't have to go through, you know, an hour-long discussion hopefully an hour-long discussion tomorrow night at the full council on this. But that was just if it was something else that we might consider as a different amount to amend to.
Okay. So is everybody Councilor DeSorga?
I'm going to move to table.
Okay. We have a motion to table. It's a non-debatable motion. I think we have to vote, but everything stops. The discussion stops. We have to vote on the motion to table. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe it needs a second.
Okay. Okay. And then we take a vote. All in favor of tabling this to our next meeting? Would you please raise your hands and say aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so we are tabled until our August meeting. We'll take it back off the table at that point. Okay, we have a few other items on here for this evening. I guess what I'd like to ask at this point is it is now 7:17. Financial activity involving the Lunt property. It's a continued conversation. Is there any update? I have received nothing in regard to what the Lunt property had cost us. We had heard before that there were no records available or very few of them. Is there anybody who's interested in a discussion of this evening? Ginny, is there any update?
I just wanted to tell you one thing, that the LSP board is actually investigating Mr. Nicholson.
Okay.
Complaint has, you know, they have assigned 2 investigators to that. And no, other than that, nothing.
Okay. Thank you for that update. They're doing a good job. They really are. And we have a review of Greenfield's budget process, but I'm thinking that we might want to continue that as an agenda item until we're back in full swing in September, in October, in the end of the year, so that we can ramp ourselves up for the next budget process, which will start in November again. We've got an audit to get through in the meantime as well. Police audit, I'm not sure what that means, because we have discussed the police audit. Anybody else have other business? Councilor DeSorga.
I would like to ask Director Gilman to take our messages back. I know that you do. I think you do a fabulous job with what you do. I just wanted you to take our messages back to the executive. Yes, to the executive. Okay. And just that I think that all of us here I do think we all want to work together, and that I'm really hoping that 2 things could come out that are collaborative with the next time. And I'd be happy to vote for those things, but I think they should both come out together, and we should be working with each other and seeing who's overseeing things. So if you could bring that forward, I'd be grateful.
No, in fact, Councilor DeSorga, I was going to discuss with Mayor, because I was on vacation last week and I really have not spoken with the mayor. And now I believe she's leaving for vacation soon. So I want to catch her on this, because I can put forward another financial order July 25th. So I will bring back the concerns and in the meantime, I think if you think about what wording you would like in terms of oversight until you can get the task force or whatever you may end up calling it in place, you know, just don't make it exclusive to that, like that minimally we want the oversight of this and an eventual independent organization or something like that. Just enough to amend it to give you assurance in the process, and then it doesn't really hold it up that much, especially if you also have the other financial order with it to fund the task force. You know, that's all I'm thinking. So I will take this back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is anybody else, other business, anything else they'd like to mention? If not, I'm going to announce that our next meeting is August 16th, 2022, 6 p.m. via Zoom. I hope it works better this time, next time than this time. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Disorder.
Second, please. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Councilor Bullock, for being here this evening, and we look forward to what happens next.
Thank you
So
so much
thank you
for
all.
having me.